We are 21 days away from the NBA draft lottery. And if you are a Toronto Raptor fan, you might be losing a little bit of sleep. Are the Raptors going to pay the price of all those late season wins? Is this a team that is potentially going to cost themselves a top five pick because they decided to prioritize development instead of doing what a good tanking team should do? You might be losing sleep over this draft. I'm not. And I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to give you some solid insight into how drafting works, how scouting works. This is a follow up, let's say a compliment to the video we did yesterday. Shout outs to Erson Demir, who came on, and I think we did a bang up job with that episode, man. Give me a W in the chat if you ended up checking out that video. If you haven't, it's racked up about 3,000 views. I think it deserves more, man. I think we covered a lot in terms of the deeper range draft prospects, in terms of the top of the draft, in terms of just a nice little overview. If you've kind of been under a rock and you haven't really been following this draft, I believe that video is a must watch for you. I think it was a really good discussion. Got a couple W's here. Thank you very much. Absolutely. So today we're going to talk a little bit deeper in terms of why the Raptors are primed to execute perfectly in this draft. And I think it's going to talk on a lot of points that you probably haven't heard about before, because that's not what we do here. We don't regurgitate what everyone else is talking about. We don't synthesize. We're not AI. We are original thinkers, and we like to come up with original thoughts. And so here are some original thoughts. Okay. I have always believed that a team takes on the identity of and the lead characteristics of its best player. For the Toronto Raptors, be that Kawhi Leonard, in 2019, the stoicism, the defense, the incredible play in the playoffs, the clutch championship gene, or whether that now be Scottie Barnes, selflessness, being light, defensive focused, team first, culture builder. That's really what he is. But I also believe that organizations take on the leading traits of their lead executive or their CEO or their head honcho. And that to me is Masai Ujiri. Since Masai Ujiri took over in Toronto, one thing that you can bank on, whether you miss the playoffs, make the playoffs, whether you have a high pick or whether you have a mid first round pick or whether you have a late first round pick, more likely than not, you're probably going to get a really good player. Why? Well, because Masai is a scout. And scouting and development has been the lifeblood of the Toronto Raptors going right back to 2013. Now, they've made some mistakes in the draft. Nobody's perfect. Obviously, Malachi Flynn and Bruno Caboclo come to mind. There's some DeAndre Daniels peppered in there. Oh, my God. The same draft, that contained Nikola Jokic. There's obviously some misses where maybe you didn't do enough to get a Giannis Antetokounmpo or Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, even though you identified them. But I think if you're looking at the Toronto Raptors draft record under Masai Ujiri, it's been way better than you could have ever dreamt of when he took the job. And I feel like everyone talks about OG. Everyone talks about Pascal. A lot of people talk about Scottie. People talk about finding an undrafted gem like Fred VanVleet. I want to tell you that the average NBA career is less than 5 years. So if you find a kid in the second round that makes it through his second contract in the NBA, you win. You win. It doesn't have to be Draymond Green. It doesn't have to be Andrew Nemhard. You don't have to find Gilbert Arenas. If you just find a player somewhere between 20 and 60 that has like a 5 to 6 year career in the NBA, you've already won. So I want to look at some of the players that the Toronto Raptors have drafted or identified in the undrafted heap. Think about this. Okay. This is crazy. Hold on. Let me pull this up here just so I can look at this here. 1 second. Okay. Ron Harper Jr. Right? That's a guy out of Rutgers, undrafted. Raptors signed him. Yeah, he didn't work out for you. Guess what? Still has an NBA job. Justin Champagnie. The free me, guy. I like Justin. I think he played pretty well. He had some good moments in the G League. I think he's developed a lot. He still has an NBA job. What about in the second round? Okay. You might look at Christian Koloko as a fail because, he had the blood clots issue, but hey, man, he still has an NBA job, right? It's 3 years after his draft and he still has an NBA job. What about Delano Banton? He's a 2021 draft guy and he gets regular rotation minutes in the NBA. To me, at 46, that's a win. That's a win. Maybe David Johnson wasn't a win, but finding Delano Banton is a win, right? You lost him for nothing. Fine. It's not a win for you, but it's a win for your scouting department. And you might say, well, those don't sound like very big wins, Rob. What about Jared Culver? The Raptors didn't draft Jared Culver, it's worth noting, but Jared Culver was a lottery pick. He's been out of the league for like 2 to 3 years. Romeo Langford, that's another lottery pick. These are 2019 lottery picks that are out of the league right now. So when you consider how the Raptors do this, I think that it's worth noting they are exceptional at it for a lot of reasons. So consider last year's draft. You walk in with 19, 31. You walk out with 19, hit, 31, hit, 45, hit, 57, hit. And then you find this incredibly impressive, perhaps way more impressive than the two players I mentioned before in the undrafted heap in Jamison Battle. How many of you right now would trade Jamison Battle straight up for the 29th pick in this draft? Sight unseen. Would you do it? Let me know. Let me know. If you're watching this video after, let me know. Because you got that guy for free. You brought him into a camp deal. You didn't give him a two-way contract. You gave him some run. Then you gave him the two-way contract. Then you converted him to a regular. Slitherman saying no. Nah, I believe in him. No. So what is this, league-wide obsession with tanking, getting first-round picks? Oh, we didn't get another first-round pick. Yo, what the hell does it matter if you're able to find borderline first-round talent in the undrafted heap? What does it matter? I want you to think about Ty Jerome for a second, right? Now, Ty Jerome is a very interesting case. Came out of Virginia, 3-year player, won a national championship, right? Ty Jerome got better every single year in college. Then he gets drafted by Philly. He was 24th overall. Bounces around. OKC, he gets traded. He has a cup of coffee, and then he ends up in Cleveland. Doesn't play very much last year. This year, he was just named as a finalist for Sixth Man of the Year. This is a guy who last year, honestly, he was worth about as much as Jamison Battle. They found him. I want you to think about guys like Isaiah Joe, right? League-wide considered one of the better shooters, a huge contributing member of the OKC Thunder's offensive and defensive blueprint off their bench, and a huge cog into their depth and defense. He was a second-round pick. Lou Dort was an undrafted guy. Organizations are taking note. The Toronto Raptors have created this incredible blueprint. As much as you want to credit the San Antonio Spurs of 20 years ago as finding guys like, I don't know, Tony Parker at 28, 27, 28, Manu Ginobili 56. Yo, let's be clear here. The Toronto Raptors have done this almost more impressively than that. Fine, they didn't find anyone as good as Manu Ginobili at 56, but look at the depth of talent that they found. OG Anunoby, 23. Look at the average 23rd overall pick. He might be one of the greatest ever. 27, Pascal Siakam. Is he one of the top 3 greatest 27th overall picks ever? I venture to think he might be the best, right? When you start to look at getting like Fred VanVleet, right? Granted, 4 for 19 last night, not great. But for the Raptors, that dude provided so much value. So when you think about this from the perspective of like, how do you build? It really comes down to scouting and development. Scouting and development is much more complicated than, oh, we should lose a whole bunch of games so we can get the number 1 pick. Can't guarantee the number 1 pick. The Toronto Raptors this year, they did something amazing. And I'm going to tell you why what they did this year is going to pay huge dividends for what they do this summer. So the Toronto Raptors got 5 rookies in the door. I think they all developed. I think we're all happy with all of them. I can't think of a lot of Raptor fans who are like, this guy sucks or that guy sucks. I know there was a lot of slander about Jonathan Mogbo early. I think some people had some doubts about whether Jamal Shead's game would translate. But I think for the most part, these players have done incredibly well. And I think the Raptors did a great job of developing them and playing them. So you walk into this year, not only with a young player like Jacoby, who could easily have gone back to Baylor and come out in this year's draft and maybe been a lottery pick, maybe a mid-first rounder. So you could almost consider that another young player kind of coming into your program. I think he's going to take a step up. You could take a guy like Ulrich. I could argue if Ulrich plays regular minutes for Texas, where he was, rumored to be looking at going to Texas, or maybe he went to Duke as their backup center or something like that. I could argue that he might get some first round buzz right now. That guy didn't really play for you last year. This summer is just like almost like his NBA career is starting over. So there's another guy. Those are two really young players that are already in your system to complement three slightly older players who are going to the second year and could be looking to be major contributors next year. So you got these five really young players that you're going to continue to develop through the offseason. And then you, of course, got Ochai and Grady. So that's seven. That's seven young players. Okay. But you know what's really interesting about that? None of them are stars. None of them are like that guy is impossible to beat in the pecking order. None of them are as good as Alex Caruso or somebody like that. So what you've done is you have all of this, let's say, hypothetical upside and potential without any of the downside of that roster is cramped. You've got open opportunity. And I think open opportunity is going to matter a lot. Okay. So not to get all over the place here, let's keep this somewhat organized. Okay. The Toronto Raptors didn't just decide to tank midway through the season. They have known since last summer. The minute they lost that lottery pick, the decision was in. They didn't bring back Gary Trent Jr. They traded away Dennis Schroeder last deadline. I wouldn't be surprised if they knew as early as January of 2024 that they were going to be tanking in 2025. To me, this is a huge win because knowing where you're going allows you to scout the course a little bit better. I think the Toronto Raptors, unlike, say, for instance, the COVID year, right? Where maybe midway through the year they found out they were going to be really bad and then they tore it down. Okay, cool. So you have 6 months to figure out what you're doing with potentially a top 10 pick, right? Here, you've had like 20 months to figure out what you might do with a top 10 pick. I think that means that you have a deeper insight into this draft than you've had into any draft in NBA history, at least under Masai Ujiri. I think, and I don't know this for sure, but I'm going based on some stuff that I've heard and just deducing this logically, that the Toronto Raptors have scouted the 2025 draft better than they've scouted any draft under Masai Ujiri. They knew it when they traded OG and Pascal that they were going to be bad for a couple of years. They knew the 2025 draft was already loaded. I wouldn't be surprised if they started scouting this draft maybe in 2022, which means what? I'll tell you what it means. You can build every analytics model in the world. You can be as plugged into the numbers and the AAU beat as possible. You can go watch film, you can break it down, but there is no replacement for building a proper data model across a large sample of development. None. The Raptors knew what Scottie Barnes was, who Pascal was. What do you think the advantage is? Why do you think other teams saw Pascal Siakam as a second round guy and the Raptors saw him as a first round guy? He wasn't 27th on their board. I heard as much as he might have been top 20 on their board. How did the Raptors see Pascal as a top 20 pick potentially in the 2016 draft? And a lot of teams saw him as a borderline second rounder. How did they know that? I'll tell you. They had a much larger data sample on Pascal. They had known him since he was 15, 16 years old. They had seen him come up through Cameroon. They had insight into the people around him. They had seen what he was before people started picking up on him. Now, again, this is 2025. There's no more Giannis Antetokounmpo level surprises where, a phenomenal MVP candidate is going to come out of nowhere and be the 15th overall pick and everyone's going to be like, who? No. Scouting is far, far more plugged in now. It's more voluminous. There's way more sites covering things. But in the end, it matters when you pick it up. It matters. Having watched Scottie Barnes since he was 15, 16 years old has given me a tremendous edge on most Raptors content creators. I have seen this guy come up through every stage of development, and I've been able to project better than the average person who just discovered him when he went to FSU or just when he got to Montverde. Seeing his development has given me more data points. It's allowed me to see the progression a lot better. It's given me a broader perspective. Okay, so how does this apply for the Raptors? Enough patting myself on the back here. How does this apply to the Raptors? Well, they've known about Carter Bryant and Rasheer Fleming and Colin Murray Boyles. They've known about these players longer. They've been watching them longer. They've seen them through AAU. Now, again, you might think that every organization has seen Carter Bryant when he was 15 years old. That's not true. That's simply not true. There's a lot of organizations out there that pay their scouts very poorly. They do not devote a ton of time to scouting deep early on because they maybe don't prioritize it. Look at organizations like the Knicks, organizations like the Phoenix Suns. They're scouting. There's pro scouts. I mean, they're way more concerned scouting NBA players. They're not looking at a random gym when a kid is 15 years old, 16 years old, and sending scouts to that. But I think knowing what I know about how the Raptors choose to operate, I think they would have gone heavy and deep into this draft way earlier than a lot of other teams. So that's advantage number one, is that they have known that this draft was going to be important to them for a long time. Advantage number two, double duty. They did a great job of scouting 2024. Why? Because, again, when you tore this down, you already had the heads up. When Fred VanVleet walked, it was obvious that you were going to have to scout not only for the top at the top of the draft, because you still had that potential that you might keep your top 6 pick. The Raptors obviously surrendered their top 6 pick, and it ended up going as 8th to the San Antonio Spurs, and they later traded it away for Rob, and that pick became Rob Dillingham for the Minnesota Timberwolves, which I think San Antonio took back as a 2031 pick. But nevertheless, San Antonio may not have been interested in that pick, but the point is the Raptors still scouted the top of that draft, which means they probably scouted Colin Murray Boyles last year. They also knew that they had a mid-first round pick from the Indiana trade, which became Jacoby Walter. But that pick could have been 14, 15, 16. In fact, the Raptors were tied for 16. They lost a series of coin tosses, which made it 19th. There was a world last year in which the Raptors got the first pick and the 16th pick, and instead they got no pick and the 19th pick. It should have been a disaster. It was a disaster. When those coin flips happened on draft night or on lottery night, it was a disaster. But the Raptors made good. They also knew that they had that 31st pick from the Knicks trade, and that gave them a very unique insight, because that 31st pick became like the way to scout the whole draft, which means they probably scouted Tyrese Proctor, Zion James. They probably looked at guys like Walter Clayton last year, which means when they see Walter Clayton this year, they probably have like 3 years of data on him, and they can actually watch the progression. They're not discovering him during March Madness like a lot of people did. They've been watching this guy for a while. Zion James, like, they're not discovering this guy for Duke this year. They're seeing his shooting progression from year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4. What about Baba Miller, a guy who, potentially could go undrafted this year? I have no idea if he's even coming out, right? Jameer Watkins in the transfer portal right now. I feel like the Raptors have an insight into this. So that's advantage number 2, is I think that they're going to be able to double up some of their scouting information from 2024 towards 2025. Because it's impossible to watch a college game without picking up some anecdotal information about the other players. It helps. Having a broader perspective and a deeper pool of knowledge and data helps. So now Ryan Kalkbrenner, Alex Condon, Thomas Sorber, all of these players that you're looking at this year, they probably looked at them last year as well. That's a huge advantage. Advantage number 3. I think that the Toronto Raptors have a really unique set of people in place that gives you the broadest perspective on global scouting. Masai has Africa, right? I mean, the plugs, It's in this world, in the NBA world, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And I can tell you for a fact that the deeper your I think the brain trust of Masai, Bobby, and Darko, like if you consider those three as the head honchos who make the decisions in the draft room, I think you have all your bases covered with those three guys. With Bobby, you have like the analytics approach and the business approach, the cap approach to everything, right? With Masai, you have really like a lot of Africa and Europe covered. And with Darko, you have a lot of Europe covered as well. Darko Rajakovic maintains great relationships. This is one thing I've discovered about this guy for years, that the people I talked to before he got hired or right when he got hired were glowing about how he'll still take time to message them Merry Christmas, or he'll still take time to maintain those relationships. This is a guy who, once he creates a relationship with you, and he's in town, he'll meet you for coffee. He takes a lot of time. And I feel like those relationships will come back and help the Raptors. I think the Raptors have a better idea of whether Mario Saint Superi or, someone like Hugo Gonzalez are good players than the average team. I feel like Darko's connections into Spain, given the fact that he coached there for a bit, or, connections into Italy, connections into Serbia, connections into Croatia, connections into the Balkans, and, even Germany are going to help the Raptors, because that web of coaches that he can talk to and pull from, the web of scouts that he would know, the assistant coaches he would know, the players he would know, are all wealth of knowledge. In fact, I'm looking at my own life right now. I have friends who have played with some of the players who are in this draft cycle. I can just hit them up and say, what was this guy like in the locker room? And now I'm getting, and I trust them to tell me the truth. So I'll be like, okay, so what was Jameer Watkins like to play with? Or what was Sion James like to play with? And I can trust that these people are going to give me the honest truth. And so now I have a better understanding of what the Raptors are going to find out when they go and ask similar people in that player's orbit. And if I hear that this player was a terrible practice player and he was late to practice every single day, I already know that's not a player the Raptors are going to draft, right? These are small advantages, but they are huge when you start to pile them onto each other. I'll give you another advantage, and this is why I think the Raptors are really going to cook in this draft, okay? Agents push clients. We've talked about this many times on this channel. I don't want to repeat myself too much, but agents push clients to certain destinations. Okay. Most NBA teams are terrible at development. There are a few that are good. We talked about this yesterday as well. Memphis is good, right? OKC is pretty good. These are stable organizations. But Memphis and OKC are small market teams, right? They're small market teams. They're very cheap. They're not like piling on the money. They're not known for like paying out big contracts either. They're not huge markets. It's not the greatest position to be as a professional athlete when so much of your money as a young player is going to come not from your rookie contract or your two-way contract, but rather the endorsements you can sign, the market you can generate. But Toronto is great at all that stuff, but they're also in a huge city. It's a global city. A city, by the way, that has come up big time in the cultural lexicon, partially due to Drake and the rap scene and the weekend. But you got to understand that the average player picked in this year's draft is going to be 20 years old. Who did they listen to for the last 15 to 16 years? What do they know about Toronto? How excited are they about Toronto? I want to get away from this antiquated, weird, millennial view of what Toronto is. And I want to really talk about how Gen Z views Toronto, because I think that if I'm going to put myself in the mind, right? I'm going to put myself in the mind of an average player who is maybe in the 40 to 65, 40 to 80 range, but they're a good young player. Maybe they're 21, 22. They've kind of expired on how people feel about them. Scouts have overwatched them, so they're just honing in on their weaknesses. So they're just not even seeing their strengths anymore. And I want you to think of that player as a Fred VanVleet or a Jamison Battle or a Jamal Shead. And I want you to know that that player has options. That player has options. That player certainly can go to their agent. And, once the draft process opens up, the Raptors are able to communicate with the player through their agent, and they're able to communicate to the player directly. They're able to bring them in, give them advice, give them feedback, just like they did with Ochai Agbaji, etc. So the Raptors actually advised, Masai Ujiri advised Ochai to go back to school. I don't know if y'all know that story, but yes, it is true. He advised him to go back to Kansas. He went back, gave him a blueprint of everything he needed to fix. You see how that kind of, years later, that kind of paid off, that relationship? That's what I'm talking about. That's the deeper insight into this. So I want you to imagine that you are that, the next Fred VanVleet, the next Jamison Battle, the next guy like that, right? Now, your agent is looking at, how do I get you to your next contract? Need to put you in a place where you're going to play. Need to put you in a place where you're going to develop. Need to put you in a place where you're going to be happy. Need to put you in a place that's actually going to take care of you when you come up for that next contract. Toronto checks every box. Every box. And guess what? What you just did with Jamal Shead and Jamison Battle this year, what you just did with Ulrich, what you just did with Jonathan Mogbo, every agent just noticed that. They all noticed it. That these players got better throughout the year, that they were happy. People talk, man. People talk. 3 years ago, we had assistant coaches openly asking other assistant coaches whether there was a job available for them. We had the entire world talking about our cultural dysfunction. That's not a fun place to be, man. Nobody wants to be there. You want to deal with border security and a piss poor locker room. But now you're hearing Brandon Ingram and, they seem like a bunch of fun guys. I heard some great things about, yeah, word travels. Word travels. People can watch. Maybe not a lot of people are watching the Toronto Raptors, but everybody knows the Raptors play hard. The Raptors defend. The Raptors develop. They're a happy group. They're a young group. There's like a college campus. You want to listen to AJ DeBonsa, his interview with, you can call it cap, you can call it whatever. You can say he went there for the dollars, but I'm going to take AJ at his face value of what he said. When he's talking to Stephen A. Smith, what did he say? He said, I chose BYU because they have a professional strength and conditioning program that's going to get me ready for the next level. They have NBA people here. Okay. So you're going to be a more appetizing option to any player in that 40 to 80 range who really wants to take their career seriously. It's just like Heat culture, yo. Davion Mitchell said he always dreamt of being a Miami Heat. Why? Because he's hard-nosed and he doesn't mind being coached hard. He doesn't mind having that Heat culture, the weigh-in and all that stuff. So they attracted the type of player that they wanted. When you have a cultural identity, when you make it clear what that identity is, you actually attract more players that suit that mentality. So, Fred VanVleet, just telling teams, don't sign me. I want to choose my own place. Jamal Shead, I won't sign a two-way. If you draft me, I'm not signing a two-way. Well, would you even make that? Would you even communicate that if the Raptors hadn't already told you that they were willing to give you a contract? Are you willing to piss on all your suitors before you have the leverage offer? I'm sure Jamal Shead would have happily gone 32 or 33 if that team was willing to give him a guaranteed contract. They were not, so the Raptors benefited. But the Raptors benefited because they were willing to do it. The Raptors benefited because they were able to make the offer, which allowed Jamal Shead to leverage the offer to better his position. The Raptors simply said, if you're there at 45, we will take you and we will give you a guaranteed 3-year deal. And we have a vacancy at the backup point guard spot that you could potentially compete for. You have given Jamal Shead the pipeline to his second contract. His agent appreciates that. Jamal appreciates that. And he's able to leverage that offer to dissuade teams, other teams, from drafting him and trying to offer him some piss poor two-way contract. You'll be able to do the same thing this year. Except this year, you'll do it in a better draft. I think you'll do it in a deeper draft unless a lot of, teams go away. Like if I'm looking at 30 to 40 in this draft, it's very similar to 30 to 40 in last year's draft, to be fair. I think there was a lot of talent on both sides, but I think the talent in this year's draft is more tantalizing for me personally when I'm looking at 30 to 40. You have the 39th pick. That 39th pick is important. That undrafted spot is important too. A lot of players could potentially go back to school and it could really deplete the bottom end talent. But if those players stay, there's a chance that some player between 45 and 60 knows that the Raptors don't have a pick, but the Raptors are already able to communicate to that player, go undrafted, and we'll give you a guaranteed two-way spot into this perfect situation, you'll be able to reap the benefits of the work that you did with Jamison Battle again this year. Do you see what I'm saying? Now, I'll give you another competitive advantage. And this is sort of piggybacking on something I already said. The Raptors are drafting in very distinct zones in this draft. Now, I've always said that the interview is the deal sealer or deal breaker when it comes to the draft. Bring that guy into your gym, check him out, measure him for yourself, get him in the gym, get the conversation rolling, get to meet him, see his interests, see how he fits, see how he looks in your gym, then make that final decision. Sometimes it blows up spectacularly. Sometimes it really cements what you already knew about that prospect coming in. Sometimes you just notice, I don't really like the guy's attitude, fuck it. I think that the Raptors will be able to invite a lot of players. Now, let's just say disaster strikes, they move down to 9. I think it's perfectly possible that they move down to 9 or 8 in this year's draft. I hope they don't. I hope they stay at 7 or move up. But let's just say you move down to 8 or 9. It's a pretty appetizing range. You'll be able to probably bring in, there's like probably 14 players, 13 players in this draft who think they could be a viable fit around pick 8. So you'll be able to bring all those players in. If you had the number 1 pick, you wouldn't be able to bring in anybody because everybody already knows you're picking Cooper Flag. But when you have a mid-lottery pick, especially a high mid-lottery pick like 7, 8, I think you get a lot of workouts because there's the guys at 4, 5, 6 who are a little bit worried they might fall and they want to be sure and they don't mind doing like a couple extra workouts, even if they think they have like top 5 locked up. So guys like Trey Johnson, maybe an Ace Bailey, I doubt it. Someone like, come on, Derek Queen, you'll be able to work all those guys out. No problem. Make matters even better, you have that 39th pick, which I think could be a really good landing spot for a lot of players. And maybe you'll be able to get 20 to 25 players in that draft range, right? Add in the undrafted heap. So you have everyone from 45 to 90 in terms of the players that you want to work out. And you're basically dangling a two-way contract. You can probably get a good insight into that. So not only have you done your work early in this draft, not only have you done a ton of work in this draft because, you know, scouting was your priority because you knew you were going to be rebuilding. Not only do you have a strong, let's say, pitch for those players to actually want to be here, but you also have 3 very far apart zones that you're going to be able to get workouts in for. And I think that that's a huge advantage. It really matters to me that you have that second round pick. Because I'll tell you right now, if you don't have that second round pick, you probably cannot get Alex Caravan in the door for a workout. You're not getting him. You're probably not going to get Tyrese Proctor or Walter Clayton. You're not going to be able to get these guys in for a workout because they're not even looking at you. They're like, they're not picking me top 10 and I'm not going undrafted. That second round pick gives you access to like 30 to 40 players that you otherwise had no chance at. And I honestly wish the pick was a lot higher because 31 is way better than 39, but I'm okay with 39. I'm okay with it. I'm perfectly fine with it. Because I think 31 is just a perfect place, personally. Last year, 31 was like a godsend pick. I'll give you another sort of weird advantage that I'm just going to throw out. You have a very young roster. And these players are a resource as well. Your roster is composed almost, I'd say over 50% of your roster was playing college basketball over the last 3 years. They played against guys, right? Scottie Barnes can give you a better scouting report of Baba Miller than probably anyone in your organization, any scout, because he's played with him. He's seen him. Like he's seen him in the summers when he goes to Florida State. He has friends who've played with him. He could probably give you a much better scouting report on Jameer Watkins and Baba Miller than pretty much anybody. Okay. Consider Jacoby Walter, guys like that. Jacoby played a lot of players who are going to be in this year's draft. So did Jamison Battle. So did Jamal Shead. These are smart people. These are really smart people. Why wouldn't you want that information? You don't think that Masai Ujiri would be willing to pick one of their heads and say, hey, pick their brain and say, hey, how do you feel about this guy? What have you heard about him? Again, expand your knowledge. You're a young team. And I think it might help as well on the flip side of that you have people that came up with some of these players. A lot of these players who are in this draft, they've played with Jacoby. They've played against Jacoby. They might have a relationship with Jacoby. Last year, we talked about it. AJ Lawson, RJ Barrett. That's a relationship. That helps. I think it helps. When you're a rookie, it helps that somebody is there who already knows you, right? The Raptors seem to be really intent on doing this pair up thing. RJ plus IQ come together. RJ becomes your little tour guide. He helps you acclimate into the city. Scottie plus Mogbo, right? You got that little thing going. You got Jamal Shead plus, Jacoby Walter, that little, Texas connection. They know each other. There's a familiarity there. John, again, AJ Lawson and RJ Barrett. So you're just giving yourself a little bit of an advantage. I would say an advantage. Jacoby and Davion Mitchell earlier, that Baylor connection where, Jacoby had said, I went to Baylor because of Davion Mitchell. Okay, boom. Now you're teammates. How's that going to help you? Every small inch counts. Okay. I'll give you another advantage. I feel like this entire video should be called Rob Stockpiling Advantages. Give me a W if you remember the 2020 draft, right? Ooh, that was bad, right? Malachi Flynn over Desmond Bane. That really sucked, right? But let me know if you remember who went within the 10 picks before Malachi Flynn. Precious Achiuwa went 20. Emmanuel quickly went 25th. Both ended up on the Toronto Raptors in subsequent years. So the scouting work that you do now is actually going to help you make better roster decisions going forward. Why? The reason that some players like Ty Jerome, Dyson Daniels, Josh Minot kind of get lost in the weeds is because a lot of teams start to hone in on the recency bias of watching them fail in the NBA. But if you have a really, really strong intuition right now, let's say, I'll give you an example. Let's say you have it in your mind that Zion James is the type of player that can be this disruptive, positionally versatile, decent shooting, Lou Dort-esque player. I'm not saying he is. I'm just saying, let's say you think that. And let's just say he goes 53rd and you don't get a chance to draft him. When he gets cut, that's a player that you can target. If he plays for a year in the G League and struggles because he's in the wrong system and then he gets cut next summer, that's a player you can target. The knowledge compounds tremendously. I want to give you a small anecdotal sort of example of knowledge compounding and interest compounding and institutional, being insightful and trying to find competitive advantages, which is away from basketball. And actually, I'm going to talk about something more personal for 2 to 3 minutes, just to take a break from basketball a little bit. I've mentioned many times that my mom and I were quite poor growing up, and we used to live in government housing, and there was a TV show or a TV channel that used to cycle through properties that were for sale in Toronto. And for whatever reason, I really bought into this American dream thing growing up of owning a home was wealth, right? We'd never owned a home, at least not in my lifetime. And so we would cycle through and we would just watch the cycling properties. And I want to let you know, this was like in 2002, 2003. So property prices were like really cheap. There were like detached homes for like $135,000. And we would just watch these. And obviously, being poor at the time, you knew cheaper is better, right? That's the only way you could think. Cheaper is better. But in 2003, I had a conversation, and so I was still a kid. 2003, I think I was like 16 years old, and I was still a kid. And I started using this Excel sheet to build up a data model for how I believed housing prices would appreciate, because I stopped looking at a house as something to escape poverty. And I started looking at potentially a house or a condominium as a purchase of wealth, like an asset that needed to exponentially grow. Because obviously, if you're going to pay interest, you want to make it back on appreciation. So I created something at the time that was very similar to what would later become the Google Walk Score. I started looking at the property's proximity to transportation, built a score model on that property's proximity to different cuisines, Italian cuisine, Asian cuisine got like a +2, maybe, certain cuisines got more, their proximity to grocery stores, their proximity to parks. And I built like a score based on that. It wasn't necessarily called a walk score, but it was a proximity score based on where the property was located. And then what I would do is I would phone up anyone who was in the area who could give me that information and talk about zoning plans, development plans, other properties that were going to be developed in the area, other condos that were going up, other, buildings, any construction that was going on, transportation, boosts and updates in that area. And I would basically try to use a model to forecast how this would work going forward. Now, wasn't able to afford a home in 2003. So a lot of that data that I had was useless. It was just a nice little, or 2004. Wasn't able to buy a home at the time. I was a kid. But a few years later, I'd worked hard enough, and sure enough, I was able to buy I was able to buy a condo. In fact, I was able to buy a couple of condos. And at that point, I dug up my old data models. And I perfected the data model based on shit testing it for the last 3 years and being able to cross-reference where I was right and wrong. And I think I made 2 and then another, which I flipped, great investments, which people to this day do not know how I got them that cheap. They're just like, "What? You got it for what?" And I was like, "Yup." And the reason was I had a competitive advantage because I wasn't just that yuppie who would walk into a home and be like, "Oh, marble kitchen, take my money." I wasn't doing that. And I also wasn't that desperate kid who was scrolling through that TV feed with my mom saying, "Ooh, $89,000 home. That's what we need to get." I found a more evolved way to look at finding a competitive advantage. I think the reason I say this is because I think the Raptors are doing that as well. I think the Raptors know that a lot of teams scout and a lot of teams have invested more money into scouting. But I think that knowing earlier allows you to build better. Having better, like just investing in your scouting department, having this sort of track record of what works and what doesn't work, even the process of how the Raptors have scouted for years has built institutional knowledge they can then leverage forward this year. I think the Raptors are going to rock the 2025 draft. I have a million reasons for why I think this is the case, right? Completely. Hang on, there's more. I think a lot of a lot of fans sort of lean into this. I want to draft high. I want to tank, that whole model, right? I think you need to get away from that because, again, that entire thought process is oversaturated. Everyone wants to do the same thing. You need to do something different. What I say, you need to find a competitive advantage. You can't be the yuppie who just wants the marble granite countertop and says, "I want to find a place in the perfectly, situated neighborhood with the best schooling." It's like, bro, that is the most expensive property on the map. You're basically looking at Boardwalk. Like, you're not like, you know what I mean? You need to find the next Boardwalk. That's how you build. So what you need there is a good reputation around the league for your, team culture. I think the Raptors have it. What you need is good leaders at all key positions, development, etc. I think you have it. What you also need is opportunity. I think you need opportunity more than anything. And I think that's one of the most underrated parts of this. When you look at the Toronto Raptors top heavy roster, a lot of people are very worried that this very top heavy roster is going to lack depth. And I don't think that's going to be a problem for the Raptors. Let me tell you why. It is much easier to find, I don't want to say Ty Jerome because he's freaking fantastic. It is much easier to find a Ty Jones than it is to find a Brandon Ingram. When you accumulate top end talent, we can agree or disagree whether Emmanuel Quickley, RJ Barrett, and Jakob Poeltl are top shelf talent to you, but let's just say that your starting five is very good by NBA standards, right? Your bench pieces right now are all hypotheticals. They're not, you don't have a single player. I mentioned this earlier, Alex Caruso. You don't have like anyone like that. You don't have like the mainstream guys that a lot of people are like, okay, they're stacked. You're not OKC. Imagine being an undrafted guy. Like imagine you're Tyrese Proctor. Where are you going? You want to go and compete with a lottery pick like Nikola Topic next year? Or you want to go compete with Jamal Shead? Who do you think you're going to get minutes over? I'm not saying you get minutes over either. I'm just saying, who would you bet on getting minutes over? If you're a team like this, like look at what Phoenix did last year. Now, Phoenix is a dumpster fire organization. Everybody knows it, but they're top heavy. They're very, very top heavy. What did they get? They got Ryan Dunn in the draft, Oso Iguodaro in the draft, right? They ended up finding Tyus Jones. They got so much value. Philly, another super top heavy team. They got a ton of value, man. They found Gershon Yabusele for frigging free. Why? Because they had minutes for him. Adem Bona, they had minutes for him. So again, people will flock to the opportunity if you create the right environment. Now, the final touch on all of this, which I think is like right now, we just kind of been pouring gasoline all over. We're dosing ourselves in gasoline. We're doing all the, the stuff. What's going to really spark the fire here? Winning. Winning is going to spark the fire. Getting eyeballs on this team, getting this team to the playoffs is what's really going to spark the fire as far as I'm concerned. Because everything I said about the 2024 draft being leveraged, like the work you did in 2024 being leveraged to 2025, guess what? You got a bunch of picks next year too. I mean, you have one fewer because you ended up trading for the Brandon Ingram thing. But you have a couple picks in next year's draft too. You have the undrafted Heat in next year's draft too. Next year's draft is even more loaded than this year's draft. What if you do end up just narrowly squeaking into the playoffs? You got another mid-first round pick coming in next year. You're gonna probably pick the best player available at that pick better than most teams. Why? Because everything I said about 2024 transferring to 2025 applies to 2025 transferring to 2026. Some quotes ring larger in your mind than others. One that rang very large in my mind, largely because I thought it was absolute bullshit until I really sat there and thought about it, was Masai Ujiri saying that Tampa set them back 5 years. I think that's the quote. So for a quote that rings so large in my mind, misquoting it is quite embarrassing. But the general gist of it was that being in Tampa for that 1 year, the COVID lockdown, the bubble, that entire thing set their organization back by like 5 years. I don't know if y'all remember him saying that, but it was something to that effect. Was it Bobby Webster or Masai Ujiri? Anyways, that notion that COVID and the bubble and Tampa set them back, that's what sits in my mind all the time. And I always wondered what that meant. And I thought about it and I'm like, it's true. You missed an entire year and a half almost of real global scouting. You probably lost people through that process, right? Flynn over Bain in 2020 set us back for sure. I think it was Masai as well. It sounds like something Masai would say as opposed to what Bobby would say. So when you think about that, you're like, okay, if you look at that 5-year thing, like in 2020, if they were saying it set us back 5 years, have the Raptors just basically gotten themselves back on track at this point? That's kind of the point. Through most of Masai Ujiri's tenure, the Raptors have been in one of two camps. Either they have picked very low in the first round, at which point you're already at a bit of a inherent disadvantage, or you haven't had a pick because you traded so many picks away. Traded away pick for Terrence Ross, Kawhi Leonard. There's so many picks that have been traded away. So right now, you're doing that thing that Masai wanted to do when he tried to trade Kyle Lowry, which is you're actually rebuilding. You're actually rebuilding. You're going to rebuild through the draft. And I think you're doing a great job. I think the Raptors are doing a great job. And I think that if you are a Raptor fan right now, and I'm not just trying to like gas you up to get you excited, I think you need to breathe easy going into this draft because I suspect that the Toronto Raptors will get at minimum 2 and possibly 3, maybe 4 really good players. Look at the trend line of how they've been scouting and evaluating for the last couple of years. I think however far behind Masai felt that Tampa set them, I think they're back on track. I really do. I feel like they're back on track. The more I scout, personally, the more I scout this draft, the more excited I get about a lot of these players. I certainly wish I had started scouting the 2025 draft early, but just like the Raptors, I believe that all of the work that I've put in over the last 5 to 6 months scouting this year's draft is going to set me up for a much, much better, easier? No, I don't want to say easier. A much better result scouting the 2026 draft. And so I believe that I want Pensare Basketball to become very draft focused. I mean, obviously, I want to continue doing the Raptors, but I want to be very prospect focused as well. I feel over the last few days, last few weeks, I've met a lot of like minded and sometimes differently opinionated people than myself in the draft world. And again, I want to continue doing what we did yesterday, right, with Erson. I want to bring a lot of people on here who have deeper insights into college prospects and international prospects than maybe I do. Let's see if we can find someone in Spain who can come on and talk about some of the Spanish prospects. Let's just continue shopping it around. As Pensare Basketball gets bigger and bigger, I hope that this community can benefit from that growth as well, because certainly this is not about, selfishly just trying to line my own pockets and, the what I would say, the vanity of trying to be like the number one Raptors channel on YouTube. That's not what this is about. This is about building an intelligent community, a positive community, certainly, an honest community, but also a very well-informed community in the Raptor space. And I think we're doing a pretty good job, guys. I really do. And I hope to be better throughout the year. I know I've promised to be better many times and then spazzed out at people, but I think I'm getting better. I think we're getting better. I expect the content to get a lot better as we go through. We will do a big board some point next weekend for sure. Let me know. Yeah, there we go. Man, you got it. You got it. Are you prepping a big board? Yeah. And I want my big board to be thorough. I'll let you know right now that I know that a lot of you are probably watching those mock drafts, right? Like, Hoop Intellect, Jonathan Gavoni, Sam Bassini, etc., right? I want you to do yourself a favor, and I want you to go back a year, go back 2 years, go back 3 years, and I want you to really shit test how well people have done in these situations and if they're getting better. Last year, I was checking out a very prominent channel's big board. They had Jalen Wells at number 60. They had Jamal Shead at 51 or 55. 55. They had Ulrich Chomche was like at 80, right? Now, I'm not saying that you can't be wrong about this. Of course you can be wrong, right? you can certainly be wrong. They also had Jacoby Walter at 8. So I was like, great, you know? But then they had Ron Holland like 5 spots above, Stephon Castle. So it's like there's a lot, right? Like when you look at the early mocks or the early, you'll see Isaiah Collier number 1 and you're just like, "Oh my god, like what are we doing here?" I think there's a consensus bias when it comes to mock drafts. I think a lot of them are absolute horseshit. There are people out there who are deeply, deeply invested in checking out this stuff. I think Hoop Intellect, like that dude, Keandre, I think he actually watches most of these players a lot. And I think he's giving you like real insight into what he thinks about most of these players. I don't think his opinions are piggybacking off of anybody. He's sometimes afraid to go out on a limb for a prospect. I appreciate that. There's a lot of really good people in the draft community that I've certainly discovered over the years, and I read them and I like to figure them out. Kristen Peak is certainly someone who's not willing to go out willing to go out on a ledge. There's a lot of people. This is a very, very crowded space. There's a ton of people. If you really start to investigate, there's like channels out there that get like 18 views and they have an entire mock draft and a big board. It's hard, man. It's a massively oversaturated space. I think that the vast majority of people who do this kind of work, the mock drafts, the big boards, I think they're so bad at this. I think the reason they do it is because it's fun. I think they do it because, it's lazy sometimes. It's not easily disprovable, right? Like if right now I say Sion James is going to be the 15th best player in this draft, how long before I have to face the consequences of being wrong? 2 years, 3 years. But right now I get a lot of buzz for being the unusually high guy on Sion James or Tyrese Proctor, or what if I say Con Knuppel is like the 3rd best player in this draft? At what point am I wrong? Like 3 years from now, 3 years from now you can cook me. But 3 years from now you'll forget because I'll have already said 500 other things at that point. It's a lot different than pro scouting. It's a lot different than game analysis or, previewing a playoffs. If right now I tell you that Houston is going to knock out Golden State despite being down 1-0, you'll know whether I'm right or wrong within 2 weeks, right? Their consequences are, or the feedback is far, far, far delayed. And I think because there's so much interest in the draft, because, like I remember in like 2002, 2001, when I was like really, no, before that shit, I was deeply, deeply, deeply into the draft, even like in 1998, 1999, where it's like, okay, Michael Olowokandi, need to find out more about this guy, Kwame Brown, Tyson Chandler, Elton Brand. Like I wanted to know as much about these guys. So this has been a lifelong obsession of mine. This is 27 years going strong right now of me trying to get better at projecting forward, right? Like, again, like I've been wrong so many times. It's ridiculous. Okay. I tell you, I was burned by Adam Morrison. I thought Adam Morrison was going to be pretty good, man. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. I thought Adam Morrison and Andrea Bargnani were going to be really good. Okay. I thought Joey Graham was going to be good. Like, there's a lot of players I've been so phenomenally wrong about. I thought Brandon Roy was not going to be good. What the fuck? I thought Andrea Bargnani was twice the prospect that LaMarcus Aldridge was. 100%, no cap. I thought that at the time. I thought Tyrus Thomas might be better than both of them. I mean, shit. Stromile Swift was one of my favorite prospects. Quintel Woods, really liked athletic players. But through the process of being wrong so many times throughout my teens, you really learn to sort of understand why you're wrong, hopefully, and you can fix it. And so, yeah, I hope that at some point it can become, I want to become one of the better scouts in the world. It's really one of my goals. Like as an MBA, you know, I hope, that I had an opportunity once when I was a lot younger to do something like this. And I hope that I can make an opportunity like that for myself again, like what Jonathan Givony did. I think, that's a really cool blueprint for something that we could do. And yeah, I think obviously there's no replacement for in-person scouting. Obviously, there's going to need to be a lot of money involved in going out every year and going to scout these players. But I really love this idea of maybe building up this community to the point where, okay, like I can actually go to the Peach Jam or the Portsmouth Invitational, or check out like some big exhibition or the McDonald's All American game or whatever. Like to be able to travel to these things, see these players up close, have those relationships, build those relationships. I don't know. I'm kind of like giving you my 10-year plan for what I want to do with the draft work, but yeah, I want to be much more than just, okay, like this is just the Raptors post game channel. Like I want to be able to be your go-to source for where you come for Raptors draft insight. So we'll build to it. Appreciate y'all. Enjoy. Please hit like on your way out. And definitely, if you've not checked out the draft preview show that we did yesterday with Erson, I'm going to plug it again. It's a good one. It is. Like, I listened to it back. I don't always listen back to the videos that we do, but I listened to that one and I was like, yo, I'm actually proud of this one. We're doing another one with a surprise guest, different guest next weekend. So we're going to keep doing this. I'm going to reach out to some more people. We're going to do more. We'll hopefully make this like a 5 to 6 episode series, which goes right through from today or from yesterday all the way through to the actual NBA draft. Obviously, a lot of players are going to move up and down draft boards based on how they interview, based on, you know, who ends up going into the transfer portal, who ends up returning, etc. But I have a very, very strong feeling that we are going to walk away, regardless of whether Bleacher Report gives us a D- on draft night. I think years from now, we're going to look at the 2025 draft and say that draft right there changed our destiny forever. I have a feeling. Talk to y'all later. Have a great one. Enjoy your night and enjoy. Appreciate this one as well. I'm supposed to be getting out of here. A lot of y'all are leaving because I've been kind of winding down the exit road. I just want to give a big shout out to the OKC Thunder, yo. I don't know if you're in Canada. A lot of our fans are not. But if you are in Canada, I hope that you are rooting for this team, man. I really do. What I watched yesterday was an ass whooping of epic proportions, historic proportions. I couldn't believe what I was watching. It was a team that was being outclassed. It looked, honestly, the last time I saw an ass whooping that badly. I mean, I understand that it has happened in NBA history. A 58-point loss in NBA history has happened. I think it was the Charlotte Hornets or the New Orleans Hornets. Yeah, it was the New Orleans Hornets that lost by 58. That did happen once in the playoffs. It was at 51 points. It was the largest game one loss in NBA history. NBA history. This is a long, long history. And a lot of playoff games, a lot of game ones have been played. It was insane, right? And I think what I watched, honestly, the largest ass whooping I've ever seen, it probably reminded me of when our freshman team faced the seniors and one of the seniors blocked my shot to the Raptors. I've just never forgotten that moment of just feeling so thoroughly outclassed and outmatched and outsized that you just couldn't breathe. And you couldn't even dribble the basketball without them like picking you off. You couldn't pass the basketball without them gapping the passing lanes. You were just getting smothered. They were pinning players to the backboard. It was just a humiliation. And that's what it felt like. It felt like the Thunder were playing 7-on-5. And that was incredible to watch. I also want to shout out, Davion Mitchell, who played really, really well. 18 points, really well. There's a lot of Raptors who are playing really well right now. Pascal Siakam, I think, had 23 points. OG had 23 points. Davion had 18 or 19 points yesterday on really efficient splits. And honestly, at times, he looked like the only Miami Heat player who could even get to the rim. I am just so amazed. Like, I think I understand that he's not going to win most improved player because, like, but he could. Like, I don't think people understand how bad he was, right? Which ex-Raptor are you rooting for the most? It's kind of ironic. I find myself split between OG and Kawhi. Fred had a fantastic game, classic from him. If I'm the Raptors, I'm literally calling every single team in the league and just sending them notes and saying, listen, if we trade you a player, that player is probably going to be really good. They traded Pascal. He's playing really well. They traded OG. He's playing really well, right? They didn't trade Fred, so that doesn't count. They traded Davion. He's playing really well. I think the Raptors are a great trade partner for every team in the league because you just know. And it's kind of ironic. This is just a bit random observation. I'm just kind of like using the last 5 minutes of this live to just give you some random observations. It's funny how we almost always look back on previous Raptor teams in hindsight and sort of appreciate them a little bit better. Like OG Anunoby, Pascal Siakam, Fred VanVleet, Scottie Barnes, and Jakob Poeltl sounds like a really good starting lineup right now, right? Don't forget Schroeder. Bro, I'm trying. I'm trying. I still don't like him. I'm gonna be honest, I still don't like him. I was actually looking through some of my posts yesterday because I searched media under PENSARE Basketball Twitter, and I was just seeing like how much I absolutely despised Dennis Schroeder. I think it just have an issue with bad point guards, man. But I gotta tell you, like, I'm very, very impressed with Davion, like the quickness with which he's making decisions, how efficiently he moves off the basketball. His shot has come a really, really long way. His tenacity defensively, his compete level and grit, doesn't seem scared of the moment at all. I am blown away by Davion Mitchell. I did not see this coming at all. I think he's been really good. I still prefer Jamal Shead. I still wouldn't pay him $10 million and all that stuff. Everything there can be true. I still don't think he really fits what the Raptors do. But man, like you really spotted one. I think you really developed one. And I think Darko Rakovic deserves a ton of credit. I think Davion also deserves a ton of credit. I really found myself turning myself around on him a lot in his last month and a half here. And I was just starting to feel like, okay, like maybe I've misjudged this character, the character and the player, and everyone seems to really like him, and he's a really hard worker, seems really humble. Obviously, he did call himself the best defender in the NBA, which I found quite comical. But overall, like, he's backing it up with like real confidence and real grit and real toughness. So, salute to Davion. They're probably going to get swept. I'm gonna be honest. I think, there's probably going to be a couple sweeps, and I think the Heat are primed to be one of those teams. But you know, we'll see what he gets this offseason. Maybe he gets like an $8 million contract, and then Esfandiar Barhaney, who said I think, who said, no, Louis Zatzman, I think said he could be in the range of $10 million. I think maybe he'll look like a visionary and a prophet. That hey, Davion actually lived up to that hype that the Raptors media built for him. I think Fred VanVleet definitely is on the other spectrum of that. Like, shooting 4 for 19 yesterday. I'm not rooting for Fred's failure, demise, or anything like that. I just find it hilarious that I'm reading comments from the Houston Rockets fan base, and it's like, get this bum off my team. I can't believe it. And then, he had the nerve to sort of slightly shade the Rockets fans in the post game, and he was smiling. And I think people just really, really don't appreciate that shit. So it's interesting, to be right and wrong about certain things. I'm really looking forward to tonight. It is the Knicks versus the Pistons. I'm really looking forward to game 2 of that. Cade struggled immensely in his first game, and that OG matchup was really tough. I expect a better game from him this tonight, so hopefully, he'll do better. But this is the playoffs, man. And I got to tell you, like, I have a feeling the Raptors, as much as people want to say, like, the first time in the playoffs next year, hopefully, fingers crossed, hopefully, is going to be really, really hard. I actually think the Raptors are going to be really surprisingly good in the playoffs, right? They have a lot of players with that game experience. They're not exactly like, I don't think they're going to, RJ quickly, they've both been to the playoffs multiple times. Scottie's been in the play-in. He's been in the playoffs once. Like, this is not the same thing as the Detroit Pistons, where like most of your roster hasn't been to the playoffs. Isaiah Stewart's never touched the playoffs. Cade's never, a lot of their young players, Asar, Ron Holland, like they have so many players who've never touched the playoffs. I feel like the Raptors will have a slightly better adjustment because Jakob Poeltl has been in so many deep playoff runs, right? Scottie's been involved like quickly, like your entire starting lineup. Brandon Ingram's been involved in deep playoff runs. So I want to say deep playoff runs, but he's had a lot of playing experience, playoff experience, etc. So I just feel like, when the Raptors hit the ground running next year, don't be surprised. I have, if this was a stock, if the Toronto Raptors were a stock, I would give them one of the most bullish outlooks for 2025, 2026 of any team in the league. I'm excited, man. I'm excited to be a Raptor fan right now. I'm excited to let all these dumbass fan bases know next year, that y'all were wrong, sleeping on our team, sleeping on Scottie, sleeping on the BI acquisition, sleeping on whoever the hell we're going to pick in the 2025 drafts, because Lord knows that player is going to be underrated the second they put on a Raptor jersey. Y'all were sleeping on Jacoby. Y'all sleeping on, Jamal Shead. I can't wait for the told you so's, and I can't wait for the winning to start again because, man, I do miss it. I do miss it. I want to tell you, like, watching every single playoff game one, watching all of these teams take the court with a realistic, maybe not so realistic chance of actually advancing into the second round, playing for something, being able to hoist the Larry Brown trophy, man. you really remember what it felt like to be that team. You remember what it felt like to go up against the Nets and think, can we make it to round two? Can we go and face this team? Do you remember what it's like to be up against LeBron in the Eastern Conference Finals with a hope and a prayer? Do you remember what it's like, to have Kawhi bounce that in and know that you are just one series away now from the NBA Finals? You know what it's like to watch Pascal Siakam make that huge play and hoist that NBA championship for the first time. That feeling can be addictive. And I'll tell you, like, as much as I am perfectly fine with the fact that the Raptors tanked this year, I'm also perfectly fine with the fact that they tanked last year. I'm great with the development and all that stuff. Yo, we're gonna have to find a way to get back to winning right now. And I desperately, desperately want this team to go on a run of winning that will extend through most of my lifetime, most of my remaining lifetime. I don't want to be in the player. I don't want to be in the play-in anymore. I don't want to be in the lottery anymore. I want to be a playoff team. I'm perfectly fine with this team consistently drafting in the mid 20s because I know they're going to find value no matter where they draft. But yeah, like I'm totally cool with it, man. And if you need any examples of, you know, mid 20s picks, yo, I'm going to tell you something. Ty Jerome was probably the best player in that Miami Cleveland game yesterday. And he came off the bench. I think he put up 28 points in like 24 minutes. And he was the 24th pick. So think about it. Talk to y'all later. Enjoy. I remember your live reaction when we drafted Jacoby, Shead, and Chomche. I told you so my ass. Interesting. My live reaction when we drafted Jacoby, he was 17th on my board. We drafted him 19th, but we passed up a player that I think was 11th on my board, which was Eve Misi. I didn't have any strong opinions on Jamal Shead or Ulrich Chomche at all. So if you're acting like I hated on those picks, I didn't hate on those picks. I said, whatever. I had watched maybe 6 games or 5 games of Chomche, and yeah, I turned my opinion around on him very, very early. And I think that if you actually want to go back and check early coverage of Ulrich on this channel, I think you will find that I was very, very, very high on all of these players. Yeah. Watch that live again. I don't need to watch it again. I know exactly what I said, and I have watched it again. I wasn't like, oh my God, Jamal Shead. There we go. Yeah, that's exactly it. It's a weird flex, man. Yeah, I have since Summer League been I want to say like one of the loudest advocates for all 5 of these rookies. I have never wavered, not for a second. I think more so than anything, I've just added how much I supported Jamison Battle to the mix, but those 4 rookies supported them all the way through. And I'm glad you left Jonathan Mogbo out of that because Jonathan Mogbo, I think, was like 21st or 22nd on my board. And I was very, very happy that we took him at 31. Would you be shocked if BI was an all-star next year, but Scottie isn't? I'd be a little surprised. I'd be a little bit surprised. FA saying, and Eve Misi has been great, by the way. So Rob was right. Appreciate the support there, FA. Appreciate it. Is James Wiseman still on this team? No, he is currently rehabbing with the Indiana Pacers, and he was waived by the Raptors. So, yeah. Scottie didn't improve. Let's agree to disagree. Talk to y'all later. Have a good one. Peace.